Thank you to everybody who's joined the webinar today. This is the Career Development Essentials webinar. I'm excited to be here with you all. I want to give you a little background about me and my career development before we get started. So my name is Isabel Oropesa, and I'm an administrative manager for UBS Financial Services. I went to a public high school in Southern California, and I attended the community college afterwards. I went to Fullerton College. So when I was there, I had a lot of different part-time jobs, right, throughout my whole college experience. And I had different part-time jobs like a swim instructor, on-campus student worker, student tutor, and all of those part-time jobs helped develop a lot of relevant skills to move me forward. And when I transferred from the community college to the university that I went to, which was Pepperdine, I made sure I had an up-to-date resume with those part-time jobs. The other thing that I did while I was in college was networked a ton. Okay, I networked with different counselors, advisors, and professors on campus. And anybody who would, what do I mean by networking? I would reach out to my professors after class and ask them for office hours. Same with the career counselors, right? Just look for a reason to set up time to speak to them and have them get to know me and the reason why I'm in school and the reason why I'm what I'm trying to study or what I wanted to pursue, right? So it's always networking is important because it can help. You never know who you're talking to that can help you continue to move along in your career.
And we do have some questions, so maybe after you finish with the formatting of the resume, I can let you know what some of those are.
Okay, perfect. So I heard some of those actually, and I think this slide was skipped, and so we can go over this slide too. But let me address first some of those questions. I heard one about the creative resume. The creative resume the type of resume that you use is definitely geared towards the type of job you're applying for, right? So mine is, I have a corporate background, so what I'm talking about in terms of that structure, the slide that I'll show in a second, again, the skeleton slide, that's more for a more corporate setting. A creative resume is for marketing or maybe in the technology sector. Like, you definitely should adapt your resume to the type of job that you're applying for. Is the mic sounding better? Sorry.
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to go back to this slide really quick because this is just in general the overview of resumes, right? So a resume should summarize your education, extracurricular activities, any leadership roles or awards and skills that you have. And it's a living document. You should definitely consider it as a living document that's subject to change and constantly needs updates. And you tailor it to the job that you apply for, right? Another question that I heard was, if you have a last name, putting your last name, that there's not a disadvantage, right? So in the workforce, that's called a bias, and hiring managers are trained to make sure that there's been a lot of strides that have been made in that area, right? I think especially with the times that we're living in today, companies are making more of an effort and are becoming more self-aware about the biases, internal biases that hiring managers might have that they don't even know about. And so that's part of the training of hiring managers to make sure that there isn't discrimination based on just names that you're reading, right? It should really be, hiring managers should be focused on hiring based on skill set and work ethic, right? And not based on last names. The purpose of your resume and the reason why you should take it so seriously and spend time on it to make sure it reflects who you are in the professional setting is because it's a marketing tool. It's a marketing tool that highlights your best qualities, and you use this marketing tool to apply for jobs, internships, colleges, and master's programs, and scholarships as well, right? And you also use it to provide to mentors or professors when you ask them to write you a recommendation letter, right? So it's always good to have an up-to-date resume for these purposes. Now let me skip forward. We talked about the quick facts already. Here's the outline. And so again, this outline is a traditional outline. It's just something basic that you can get started with. But there are all different types of formats, and there's all different ways to structure your resume. And I think the biggest thing that I want you to take away here from this slide is just understanding the presentation of it, whether it's a creative resume or a more traditional one. You want to make sure that it's easy on the eye and that you're able to read it. A recruiter is able to read through it quickly, right? And that your contact information is on there. The alignment, the aesthetics of it is important too. Let's see.
So we have a couple questions that would relate to this. One of
Okay.
them is, how do you build a resume when you've never had more than 1 or 2 jobs, and those jobs might not be related to the job that you're applying to?
Good question. So I think that, and we'll talk about this a little more. So let me move on to this next one. A lot of times, jobs that you might have had, like for me, I was a swim instructor and I was a tutor, and I was an on-campus student worker at the community college, right? And when I went to the university and I transferred, I really wanted to get into the sports industry. And I had no sports industry background, right? So what did I do? I spent time with an advisor, with a school counselor, school advisor, and went over my resume, which had, informal work experience, like not informal, but just different, right? Tutoring. And what you want to focus on is the skills. If the past work experience that you have doesn't exactly correlate to the job that you're looking for, there are skills. You want to then focus on the skills. And we're going to spend some time talking about that next. Skills that are applicable and transferable to that job that you're looking for. So like in my case, as a student worker, I helped organize different events on campus, right? So that's a skill, multitasking and organizing and executing and planning, right? So those skills were needed in sports too, but in a different capacity, right? That was working with athletes, working with fans. Like it was different, but I was able to speak to these specific skills that I acquired with jobs that were completely unrelated, right? So let's go in. I hope that answers that question. But let me go ahead and dive into this next slide. Part of when thinking about the structure of your resume and building it, you want to make sure that you're focusing on the different roles and your attitude and performance, right? So employers, knowing that you don't have a lot of work experience, they're going to look for other things. What are those other things? Your habits, your attitude, your work ethic. They don't expect you to have a lot of experience. So if you have anything that you can think of that can help you, make sure you add that. So, and if it's not added to the resume, make sure it's added to the stories that you want to say when explaining your resume, right? Because one thing is the written document, and another thing is articulating and speaking to your resume, right? And so when you do that, and as someone who doesn't have a lot of work experience on your resume, you want to focus on, like, for example, if you had perfect or near perfect attendance, or you're punctual for school and other commitments, then you want to highlight that you're someone that's always punctual, that you follow up, right? Those are good skills to have in the workplace, regardless of where you're working. Here are some other skills that are applicable: the ability to learn quickly, the ability to understand, carry out oral and written instructions, the ability to think critically, the ability to speak up and request clarification when needed, having interpersonal skills, the ability to work as part of a team, the ability to build relationships. Those are all skills that are needed and that employers look for, and that you can develop in different jobs regardless of the industry, right? So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't know where to start, just start by making an outline of all these different areas that we're talking about, right? And you can put it together in your resume format later. And it's also important to have the outline of your strengths and your experiences, because again, depending on the job, you might need a completely different resume, right? You might need to highlight different skills that for a different job you wouldn't need to highlight, right? So have one document that an outline that has that's keeping track of your experiences, your leadership roles, your involvement, your community involvement, your volunteering, any time that you volunteer. Keep an outline of that, right? And once it's time to submit your resume for a job, go back to that outline and look and see. You review the job description. That's another important thing to do. Always review the job description. You don't just have this is why I say you don't just have a static resume, one resume that you use to apply to all jobs. Don't do that. First, review the job description, look at what they're looking for, and if that's something that that you think you have some type of experience, or even if you don't, look at these and the skills that they're looking for. And if any of the skills that you think you have on that outline of all your experiences and the skills that you've built through just being in group projects together, right? Or those part-time jobs, then you start to prioritize those and put those on the resume for that job application instead. So that's what I mean by adjusting your resume skills if appropriate. You want to use action words. Make sure you're using action words, and keep it short. Like don't have every bullet point be very wordy, right? What you want is to be able to tell a story when you're asked about your experience in those, when you're asked to speak about your resume, basically. You want to have a story versus just reading them the resume that they already have in front of them, right? So what can you tell them about your time as a part-time student worker, as a part-time barista at Starbucks? Like, what can you tell them as a story that they won't know just from reading your resume, right? And then make sure you've proofread your resume. You always want to make sure that you don't have any typos in there that can take away. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to the next slide here. Is there any other questions, Gloria?
We do. We have several other questions. And so one question comes to us that says, is it okay to ask for some clarification on why it takes 5 to 7 seconds when a recruiter looks at your resume?
You know, that's just a stat. It's just a statistic. I think being a hiring manager myself, sometimes what I'll look for is, for example, I think that stat comes from like when there's the first round, when somebody just applies, when it's the first round of applications and you receive, sometimes I'll receive like 300 resumes. What's one thing I'll use to sort? One thing will be location. Like sometimes, and now you can't even do that because there's opportunity to be remote, right? So a lot of times a cover letter is actually really helpful, because you'll look for what that person is. The cover letter for your resume will explain like what you're looking for, right? And so a lot of times there could be overqualification, right? If I have an entry-level position open and I'm looking for somebody that that could fit that role, sometimes we have like an executive apply that has management experience. Maybe I won't call that person because I compare that to the other 100 applications that I have of maybe some students who have just graduated from college. That I would call them because they have it's an entry-level role, right? Or sometimes I'll have another resume that has a lot of secretarial experience, someone who's been in the field for a long time, but most of their jobs have been like supporting an executive or more administrative in nature. I'll call her too to see, you know, she realizes this is entry level, but why is she looking for a new job? So that's what I mean by glancing. A recruiter sometimes will glance quickly, right? It's usually when there's a ton of applications, but you definitely spend more time once you have a smaller pile, and you just start to call candidates to get to put on the calendar for an interview. So I think it's more that is more of a first glance, but it's not like that's the last time you look at the resume. You also have to, as a hiring manager, you also have to call and set up an interview, and the interviews are usually the most important. What's another question?
So another question that we have is, how far into the past should you consider including in your resume?
That's a really good question. You know, your resume shouldn't be longer than a page, right? So it's not about listing every single job you have. That would be the outline that I'm talking about that you should have on the side, right? But your resume should be 1 page long. Mine, I'm 7 years into my career and it's still 1 page. So I think what you should think about when building your resume for a specific job opportunity is putting on the resume jobs that are applicable to you applying to this job. So what do I mean by that? If you don't have a lot of work experience and you have a ton of babysitting experience, right? Then you can put babysitting. And what do you put what skills are applicable when babysitting? Okay, are you reliable? Somebody trusted you with their kids, right? For how long? So you were a trusted babysitter for 3-4 years for the same family, right? Are you punctual, right? You have to be punctual when you're babysitting. So thinking of, I guess it's a combination of, if you have too many job experiences to put on, and it makes it longer than a page, then just leave the ones that are most applicable to that job that you're applying for.
Another question is it a good idea to keep some of my activities from high school, since I have not done a lot of activities in university?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's another example. So if you don't have enough to put on there, then make sure you're putting on there skills and activities, after school activities that you did, even if it was in high school. That's totally fine. Because what employers are looking for when students are graduating from college, and they know that you guys aren't going to have a lot of work experience. So what they're looking for are those skills, right? What did you participate in high school or in college that outside of the classroom that help you develop skills that the employer is looking for, right? And so let me, there's usually 5 skills that almost every student has that almost every employer is looking for, right? The first one's communication, oral and written communication. If you have strong oral and written communication skills, you know, have you ever given a speech in class, a presentation? then you have oral communication skills, right? Have you taken any courses that involved writing? Did you participate in the school newspaper, in speech and debate? Like all of the strong written and oral communication skills will take you far, right? Follow-up skills, dependability and responsibility, right? You can highlight that skill in some way, like I said, in terms of the babysitting or a barista, right? Did you make it to your shift on time every time? You know, things like that, just being able to be dependable, strong communication skills, quick learner. Being a quick learner is another skill to highlight, right? If you're, an employer doesn't expect to hire you and you learn the job tomorrow, right? But are you a quick learner, right? Can you think of a story that you can share with an employer that shows you're a quick learner? Teamwork. If you have the ability to work well within a team, that's also a skill to highlight when applying for a job. Because most of the time, a job setting involves working with other people in some form, in some way. So if you're able to demonstrate that with any type of experience you had in high school, college, that's great too. And the last one is technology. Employers are always happy to hire employees who have a good comfort level with technology. You guys are the future, right? So luckily, many high school and college students have that skill too. So if you have any type of experience or any further experience with technology that would help highlighting, definitely make sure you do that too. So one of the activities that oh, go ahead, Gloria.
I'm sorry, there's just one more question. The
Sure.
question is, how big of a factor is the prestige of the college you attend in getting your resume recognized? Are people that graduate from community college at a disadvantage?
Yeah, so it's not as big of a deal as you think it is, and that's not to discredit anybody here who has the opportunity to go to a more prestigious university. You know, I went to community college, no shame. I'm getting my master's right now at USC, but it took a long way to get there, right? And at the end of the day, I'll tell you, as a hiring manager, what I'll look for is that they have education, but I'm not looking at the name of the school. And if I do, right, I'm like, oh, it's like a cool fact, right? That it doesn't have as much weight as you think it does. At the end of the day, the employer cares more about the skills that you bring to the table, not the name of the school. It's all about the skills that I just spoke about right now. So try to remember that, because there will be people that tell you otherwise. But I'll tell you right now that I've broken through that red tape, and you always want to be the one that just surprises the employer, like, oh, you went to community college and you made it here? Like, yeah, I did. So don't let that bother you too much. Community college is a great route. It helped me save so much money. So it's, I guess what's not spoken about enough is those skills that we just spend time talking about. Like, that's what truly matters at a young age, as a young student trying to start your career. What matters is the skills that you bring to the employer. If you can show how you're dependable, you're reliable, you're a quick learner, you can adapt, you have strong adaptability, ability to adapt, like, you're going to go far. Strong written and oral communication skills, that's what matters when you're starting out in your career. Everything else just helps or doesn't help, right? It helps if you have someone who's, I'm a Trojan and someone else is a Trojan, cool, you get to bond with them, but that's it. So any more questions, Gloria?
There is a request to see the template of the initial skeletal resume that you put up, so that people can see what it looks like. And then if you can also address the creative resume, or what type of resume you would use for graphic design.
Sure. So I'll tell you, this this presentation is actually on Destination or at the Fulfillment Fund's website under the Destination College, under presenters, I think. All of the slides are there. So, I mean, I can go back quickly just so that you can see the structure. But also, you know, again, this is a very traditional resume. You can, if you just Google creative resume templates, you'll be able to, and you can click images, or if you just Google and look at the links that come up, thumb through it. There's a lot of information out there, guys, and there's a lot of different formats to leverage and just take a look at. So I'm definitely not speaking to the creative resume. I don't have a creative resume, but that information is easily accessible. You just have to know to look for it, right? So I definitely encourage you guys to keep that in mind and just spend some time a Sunday afternoon and dedicate some time to the development of your career, right? And making sure you have a strong resume. So I would encourage you to look up those details for the creative resume too. I promise you, if you just Google, you'll find suggestions, tips, best practices for that creative resume too. Okay. So one thing I want to get through, because I want to move on from the resume and also get to speed networking really quick. So this is just a best practice for you guys to keep in mind. If you haven't worked on your resume, pair up with a friend, proofread each other's, share what you've learned today in terms of the focus of skills, right? It's really about the skills that you can bring to the employer. And make sure that it's easily accessible. Review it and update it every 6 months. When you're a student, you're going through different part-time jobs. Don't discredit yourself by not keeping track of everything you're doing, right? And maybe you focus on that outline, that overall outline that I'm telling you to keep. Make sure that every job you have is listed there with the skills that you developed during that time. And then when it's time to apply for a job, go back to that outline and grab from there what's applicable to put on your resume for that specific job that you're applying for, right? And then have a professor or a mentor look at it from time to time too, to proofread. It's always good to get advice from your mentors or your professors for your resume. Have them look it over. Ask them. Don't be afraid of asking. Your mentors are here to help you move forward, so they'd be more than happy for you to approach them with something like this. Any other questions about resumes before we move on to the speed networking here?
No, we have all those questions answered, but we have about 9 minutes left.
Okay. So we just have 2 slides left here. So this slide, speed networking, what is that? It's an opportunity to meet new individuals who can directly be of help to you. It's not just about what you know and what you can do, but also who you know. Okay, so it's usually the type of event that's planned by a school's career services and counseling office, or it might be part of the planning and programming of a nonprofit like the Fulfillment Fund. Networking in general, right? So speed networking is an actual event where they'll bring different employees who volunteers to just come meet students, and you'll rotate around the room, or sometimes you end up clicking with one executive and you stay there and you stay talking to them, right? So that is what speed networking is, and that's what networking is, right? Speed networking is just a type of event where they bring a ton of employees from different organizations, different agencies, different companies, and they come to meet students. And so you have to be prepared when you come into these types of events, right? And how do you prepare for that? You prepare by making sure you have questions, like what type of questions are you going to ask them, right? And that's on the next slide. But the most important thing is practicing what you're going to say to them. What do you want them to know about you, right? So what we refer to, or what I'm going to refer to next, is called the elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch is basically a 30 to 60 second statement, and it's a description that speaks to a 30 to 60 second description of who you are, what you're doing, where you want to get to, and why it's important, what makes you unique. So, I've put some questions here on the slides for you to think of when you're creating your own elevator pitch. And you want to make sure that your elevator pitch covers that. And why is it called an elevator pitch? Because if you go into an elevator and you run into somebody important, you're able to, if you're able to introduce yourself and say what you're passionate about, say what you're trying to do, what type of opportunities you're trying to get to before the elevator ride ends, then you've been successful, right? You're able to have a couple sentences that describes who you are, what the career trajectory that you're pursuing, you're able to describe that, then you've nailed it, right? And so, for example, if I run into somebody, if I'm at a speed networking event, I'm going to say something like, "Hi, my name is Isabel Oropeza. I work at UBS Financial Services, and I'm also pursuing my master's at USC right now. I'm passionate about leadership and philanthropy, and I want to work, and I like doing the type of work where I'm helping others and influencing other people's lives positively." I just said that on a whim right now. I could probably narrow it down and have it be a lot better, but that's what I mean by practicing, right? So you want to make sure you practice how you introduce yourself, who you are, where you're looking to go, and why, right? What makes you unique. So that's the conversation that you want to have when you're asked about yourself and when you introduce yourself. And then these are questions. So this is the last slide. These are questions that for you to ask, right? And it probably makes sense to start by asking them what they do, what they like about their job, what they don't like, any tips for success. But if the conversation keeps going, then definitely start to ask them about college, right? What did they major in college? What setbacks did they have? How did they pick the career that they picked, right? And so I hope that those questions help you guys. And also, before we close, I want to make sure I give you the survey code. The survey code is resume. So I want to make sure you guys have that, and if you can complete your surveys. But let me go back to Gloria here and ask her if there's any more questions about this subject of speed networking and elevator pitches.
Not so much about speed networking, but there are two additional questions. One of them is, what do you recommend for recent college graduates who do not have direct experience in the field, and yet the prospective employer is looking for someone with at least 1 year of experience?
I would say still apply. Still apply, because as an employer, you can ask, I want at least this much experience, this or that, but you never know the pool of applicants that they have. And all you need is just to be able to get your foot in the door, right? So don't get discouraged, apply, and then have stories in your back pocket, right? Have stories that highlight those skills that I spoke to earlier, right? Dependable, reliable, organized, technology, communication, strong communication skills, right? Have those in mind, have those stories in mind, and just try. Don't not apply because it asks for a 1 year experience. You never know. You never know the job applicant pool that they have. They might not have anybody applying. They might not have any strong candidates. So you never know.
An additional question about what happens if I stumble when doing my elevator pitch? How do I recover from it?
You can apologize, say, I'm sorry, I was nervous, but or don't, just keep trying. And what you can also do is practice at home, right? Practice with your sibling, practice with a parent, practice. The more that you practice, the more comfortable you'll be in saying it, right? Like I kind of stuttered when I was trying to say it right now to you guys because I didn't practice I haven't practiced an elevator pitch in a long time. I usually start by saying I'm passionate about leadership and philanthropy, so I have that sentence down, but that's it. So it gets better the more you practice it. And if these are the types of things that make you uncomfortable, then you should look to participate even more. Because at the end of the day, these speed networking events help you for job interviews too. Because the more that you can get comfortable talking about yourself and your work experiences, your skills that you've developed through work in a professional setting, the more comfortable you'll be during a job interview. Any other questions? I know we're at time.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. One of the questions is, do you draw an emphasis on any specific majors? And then there's also a request to see the last slide, please.
The last slide just says thank you. The one before, this one?
Yes, I believe so.
The first question, a preference for a major?
Is there a specific, is there a focus on specific majors?
I guess I don't understand the question, but a focus, go ahead, Gloria.
I think what they're trying to find out is if when you are reviewing a resume, are you looking for students that have specific resumes, or does that not matter? And then after you answer this question, we are closed. So I'll remind everybody, resume is the survey code, and the survey will be available on Wednesday.
Okay. I think there's only very specific jobs that look for a specific major, like maybe, you know, if you're on the lawyer track or medical track, like those. But the majority of the jobs out there, I always tell like my cousins, focus have your major be something that you enjoy learning about. Like my major was communication, right? And I learned all about organizational communication, interpersonal communication, communication and leadership. And it was very philosophical in nature, but at the end of the day, at work, it's applicable from a strong communication, strong written communication skills and strong oral communication skills. So I would say from a major perspective, just focus on majoring on something that brings out the best of you, that makes you curious and wants to keep learning, right? Don't do it based on the money. Don't do it based on the money, because you'll always end up feeling like you're not doing enough and you can always have more money. I guess it's focus on the major that's going to help sharpen your skills, whatever you're good at. So that's what I would suggest in terms of a major. But an employer doesn't look at a major as the reason why. It could be helpful. Like I work in the financial services area, so depending on the type of job, if we need an analyst, if he was an econ, finance, business administration, all those majors, one is not better than the other. I just look at it and see, oh, he has some type of background because of his school, but I'm not going to prefer the econ major over the business administration. That's not how we would think.